It's all about the talent, and clients are very fixed on what talent they want. And actually, we think the same shift needs to happen in some of these markets because platforms are changing, their algorithms, you're changing, your platforms reflect this. So we sort of need the final piece that let us select talent based on new criteria versus the name and follower in a more sort of traditional influencer way. You select our creators, basically.
Validating that content first approach based on the value of the content versus like traditional casting of creators.
Explore the minds and marketing strategies behind today's winning brands and businesses. Tap into the power of the creator economy with Earned by CreatorIQ.
Hi, I'm Brit Starr, CMO at CreatorIQ. We're on a mission to make business more human and humans more impactful. So I'm talking directly to the leaders, doers, and creators changing marketing from the inside out. Let's get started.
Hi, welcome to Earned. I am very excited to be here in person in London with two powerhouse women. We are going to talk about who they are, what they do, the state of agencies today, and how creators are playing a huge role in transforming the media landscape as we know it. Before we get started, thank you guys so much for being here. I'd love to give you the chance to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about why you are interested and excited to be working in the creator space.
No problem, I can kick on. So I'm Anna Romani. I'm the global lead at Publicis Media Content Innovation, or PMCI for short. And it's a part of our network that looks after growth specialisms. So what we focus on is influencer, all sorts of partnerships, so co-creating with different types of media brands or streamers, things like that, and also gaming. So a really rich space. So we sort of do more creative campaigns for our clients. And my role is to really sort of oversee those specialties, including influencer, and make sure our capabilities everywhere are at the same level as everywhere else. So we can always deliver great services in those spaces. And by far the fastest growing is creator marketing. So that's sort of exploding at the moment. I'm sure everyone listening to this is of it.
Yeah, love to hear that. I think too, it's really interesting. It's like a center of excellence for specialties.
Exactly. It's great.
Yeah. And I'm Emily Hare, lead, so sitting in Anna's team in PMCI and connecting different teams around the world, speaking to client leads about the opportunities. So if I could go the saying center of excellence piece, but particularly interested in the space that's so fast moving and permeates so many different bits of advertising space as well.
Well, and you have a background in journalism as well. So you're a storyteller yourself, right? The original creator, journalist and editor, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting that those kind of, skills around storytelling, around thinking about how to present a piece of content and different ways into it. So applicable across a whole range of things.
Definitely. I want to talk about a couple of things today. I think one is just the agency landscape as it exists today. I think 2024 was a pretty wild year for agencies in general. There's a lot of movement, consolidations, acquisitions, mergers. I would love from your perspective, not to repeat or digest the news that we've all read, but where do you sit? And specifically, how is creator marketing in your group affected and impacted by a lot of the movement that's been happening in the space at large?
I guess the wild ride for us in 2024 was acquiring Influential. So that's the biggest influencer marketing agency the group acquired. And Anna and I are involved in the vetting and now the integration. So that, in terms of we're seeing across the board, a lot of consolidation in these kind of different agencies, a lot of competition still in the space, across specialist agencies, across holding companies, across talent networks. So it's really interesting to try and make a stake in the ground, I think, from that point of view.
What do you think it says about kind of the role of agencies in creator marketing and how they partner with brands that they're bringing more influence, their not just services, but technology in-house to sit under the same roof?
Yeah, I think it's interesting from the point of view of brands just seeing what this way of connecting with people can do for them. And so that's why they're starting to pay kind of bigger amounts of attention and invest more money over time. And so it's kind of almost like a bit cyclical in terms of marketing as a whole, brands bringing maybe social in-house in the past, things like that. So it's kind of interesting to maybe try out something in-house at a smaller scale, but then think as you scale up, you tend to, if you're a large brand, that's why I find out what to work with an agency just for the diversity of range. It's appreciation of the wider marketplace that's almost impossible to have if you're a marketing manager concentrating on a lot of things within one brand.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like with the influential acquisition specifically, that's a much more media focused tool and technology. What is the role of creators in media? Do you see those things getting closer together, right? Like kind of the creative strategy around what creators can do for your business. PGC, we have content, we have product development. There's so many ways creators can work with brands and businesses today. But also media is a muscle that brands know and understand. So I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about that evolution.
So I can talk a bit about this. I think at the group, as you say, when we acquired Influential, the fact that they were sort of close to our media roots on the Publicis media side was sort of a big factor of why it made sense for us to acquire them, because we've seen the group, but everyone sees as creator spend increases, it sort of helps us diversify our social spend a bit. So we're not just spending so much, particularly with the wall guarded, but hopefully by partnering with a capability like Influential and seeing how we can scale that type of service globally, we're able to sort of diversify our spend within the paid social space. And also, there's so much data from places like yourself, TikTok, our own data that show generally having more creative variety within campaigns by using creators. It sort of increases the media ROI, which is obviously always what we're looking to do from a Publicis media perspective. I think also we're sort of trying to connect the dots across all of our media org. And something I've seen in the last 12 months is how much more central influencer is to the media story. A few weeks ago, the group published news about our new connected media offer, which really thinks about media, influencer, commerce, CRM together with sort of individual IDs at the middle. So we know everything about people and we try and connect the dots across all our media capabilities sort of under one roof. And I think as a group, we're alone sort of able to do that. And that's definitely where we see lots of growth for our clients. And obviously, as I said, anything we can do to increase return on media spend, we think influence is a good way for us to get there. So yeah, it's exciting. But a lot of integration and that very much a work in progress.
Yes.
In the dots, I'd say.
Really attractive position because you're able to get much more of an overview rather than thinking about influencer as one high-load channel that could get you some reach or something like that. So I think when you start to think about it as part of the whole is where it becomes really exciting.
Yeah, it's super powerful. I think it's also, we talk a lot about even within part of the power of us. So we work with, obviously, as partners, all platforms, but they're also our clients because they also need to kind of aggregate data across channel formats, et cetera. And creators exist, they're platform agnostic for the most part. So they exist within and beyond channels. And so having the ability to take what has been either untracked channels completely or channels that have been hard to track in the aggregate, right, all together, I think is an incredibly powerful tool to not just target, like this came up earlier in a conversation, this idea of audience being stagnant and static, but really understand the landscape and make sure that your messages are getting to the right people at the right time and place, but more than that, that they're resonating and that you can optimize against that resonance, which I think is so important in creator marketing and more broadly. I think it's why creator content works better.
And it's something I think that we're planning now, and as we develop sort of scale the more influential style approach, we're going to try and, in the same way they've done in the US, shift human marketer perception in other markets, that actually what matters most, as we're talking about this morning, is the content versus the creator and their followers. I think actually what we see ex-US at the moment is in some markets, especially like a market like Italy, we know it's all about the talent and clients are very, very fixed on what talent they want. And actually we think the same shift needs to happen in some of these markets because platforms are changing, their algorithms, you're changing, your platforms reflect this. So we sort of need the final piece that let us select talent based on new criteria versus the name and the follower in a more sort of traditional influencer way. You select our creators, basically.
Like validating that content first approach based on the value of the content versus like traditional casting of creators.
The other change, again, now we're sort of trying to join the dots across the media orbit, but some more is this post we'll probably start more with audiences as well. So that we have so much data about individuals as an audience and can build audiences, knowing what creators they actually follow, and then sort of go into that pool of creators to then find out who's creating the content we want. So we sort of have the two layers, like we know our audience following them, then we go and do sort of content analysis piece and engagement piece. And that sort of ends up as the sweet spot of the creators we want to work with. I think that's a new layer that we can bring as we sort of join the dots with media more.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You touched on this a little bit, but I'm also curious, you work with so many global clients, pretty much everyone. What is that blend between global and local? When you start working with clients, how do you establish the perspective that they're looking to bring in terms of their, status as a global brand with the local adaptation, execution? So one, what does that process look like with your clients? And then two, has that also changed in recent years with, again, kind of the idea of, borders or boundaries being less clear in a very digital world?
I think so. Where influencers started tended to be, what we've heard from a lot of markets and clients, that it would start in a local market, local influencers, speaking to that community. And that is really important. Then the global brands that we work with, they're starting to want to get more of a perspective at a global level, make some consistency around the kinds of influence they're using, consistency around the reporting that they're seeing. So if it's a multinational, multi-market, multi-brand parent company, they can start to make sure that they're not competing across different brands, the influence they're working with, things like that. So I think it's, while the actual activation's still local, and that's really important, there's much more of a clients paying much more attention at a global level to having a point of view and trying to consistently get better every time across many markets.
Yeah.
Almost enabling at the market level so that the teams can get better, the communities can get better. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and we've been developing a lot of playbooks for clients, things like that, where we're laying out here's an approach to influencer, here are different kind of types of influencers that different brands can work with, and even educating finance teams around how you be paying influencers, educating legal teams around contracting, so the brands understand across the board. And so it's obviously not the same across every client, but some of the smarter ones are doing those kind of pieces of work.
I love that. I think that's something that gets discounted a lot or underrepresented, is the role of agencies as thought leaders in general for the industries that you exist in, but also within your specific clients. How can you help drive education internally so that they can be more successful, get further faster? I know you said it's bespoke, right? It's very distinct client over client, but what are some of the universal aspects of those playbooks that you're putting together? What can people think about when they are considering putting together a playbook of their own? What are the big questions to answer?
Actually, at the round table, we have this thought that there's a great quote that influencers can do anything, but they shouldn't do everything. I think that's often what we're trying to help brands focus on. Is very often the first chapter of a playbook is the role of influence for this brand. They can go across the funnel, but where do we think the sweet spot is for this brand?
How do you figure that out?
I guess a lot of same way you would, category data, performance data, know what the brand's objective is. It's different by category. Are we driving sales? Is this really about engagement? Is this changing brand perception? All the sort of normal triggers we pull. But I think nailing the role is sort of the first point. And then, as Emily said, because we're often working with portfolio brands, helping brands not cannibalize each other who are in similar spaces. So this is something in the auto category, the pet care category. They have tons of similar brands with people passionate around the same areas. We try and carve out particular focus areas for each brand. So, you can work with this type of influencer around these passion points and messages, and your content's a bit more fun, playful. And then to these brands, it's more about the science part or whatever it is. So again, that will be a piece. And then there's, which you can imagine, there's a wiggle in there around influencer selection, the criteria. But I think a lot of that's actually changing, and that's what we need to look at, because as we're going to more content, we talked previously, Yoda talked a lot about sort of demographics and audience and location, and so I think it sort of needs to change a bit. And I think they also, we always try and have playbooks as live documents, that they're not sort of PDF and sent once and updated 3 years later. They typically live up live links, and they're really updated with examples of content that's worked well. If something works well, that goes in as a slide, sort of prove a point. So yeah, living, breathing, I think is a good way of thinking about that.
Yeah, I love that. I also think the content first, just to put that in context, on YouTube, for example, 80% of the views on any given video is not from subscribers. So only 20% of the total video views are going to be from people who subscribe to that channel. So the large majority of views is people getting served that content or searching for content similar, right? It's that's the power of content first, is that it's really the creator is incredibly important because it's who's creating the content, who has the perspective, right? It's what they bring to the table, but it's less about their audience than it ever has been before. Okay, you mentioned this earlier, and I know it's a very hot topic, but I want to talk a little bit about how we pay creators, how we understand how to pay creators. Again, I think the global local aspect of that is quite interesting, but walk me through those conversations with your clients. How do you enable them to understand and validate the value and mutual value exchange of their creator partners?
I will say, in terms of the value that they're getting from them, I think it depends throughout the work they're trying to do, first of all. So if what kind of campaign, what kind of objectives they've got. And I think we're seeing now, compared to a couple of years ago, clients really understanding and being enthusiastic for that kind of value. I think what they're kind of adjusting to is the cost, because that's gone up over time. But then if you compare it to other media channels, probably still relatively cheap. But if you think about the different elements that you're getting, different ways that you could work with a creator, like obviously creating a piece of content, also their audience, and that kind of long-term relationship they built up that we were just talking about. I think there's kind of number of different elements, and like, we talk a lot about measurement. Some of those are kind of harder to quantify than others, and it does take maybe some clarification from a marketer when they use find media and other channels, which is actually much more straightforward as a position.
Do you think it will get more standardized over time? Like, have you already started to see more standardization for brands and creators? Is that within our future, like, line of sight?
Did you mean in terms of sort of more standard creator pay brackets and things like that? That's just a bit Wild West. I think it is to some extent. I think the more benchmarks we have, and I think it works on both sides. We don't overpay like we used to. We know when we're sort of being given a price that's way overinflated. And also, I think the stricter content is you don't overpay so much on trends. There's always another good choice. Do you see what I mean? So I think we can be much more fair both ways now. We can be much more confident with our recommendations. There's just such a strong pool of talent out there that we can work with, especially for sort of more general lifestyle briefs. A couple of our teams have fixed rate card models where they negotiate rates with creators at the beginning of the year, and they're fixed for a year. And that makes it fast for them, and it makes it fast for us. We're not renegotiating every time. It means creators can't renegotiate if they have, a big increase. But equally, next time they come back to us, if we use them a lot, they can renegotiate then. But it also means if they're good, we probably give them more business if we think they're good value. So I'm not saying we'll do that for all creators, but I think moving towards a pool of creators that we sort of have equitable value rate cards with, I think is something that's, a way we're moving towards. And that helps you scale on both sides. It helps them scale and us scale, us taking hours to negotiate a contract or a fee, because it's not, it's not value to either side. We need to sort of get there quicker.
And plan on their end as well. I would imagine that's a really big value add for them because they're running a brand and business. Like, imagine if we all worked on, short-term one-off contracts versus annual retainers or long-term retainers. I think it changes the way we operate as individuals, as business owners.
It's about efficiency.
But then on the positive side, from your creator's point of view, that gives them a chance to kind of be a bit more playful, to be a bit more experimental, to know that they're not going to slip up once and get booted out, so they can start to enjoy the relationship that they have with that brand a bit and bring it into other pieces of content.
Yes, I love that. Okay, you mentioned categories earlier. I'd be curious, we work across so many sectors. What sectors would surprise us in terms of their sophistication or even enthusiasm for creator marketing? Like, where have you been the most surprised to go under the hood?
You see, it's one of my favorites is the work we do there's a prepaid card, I think it's prepaid finance card in Poland called Blit. And some of the work they do is some of the most creative work that I've seen. Like, they've done drama series with cast and creators, just really, really engaging stuff. I think finance is much more creative than you think. It's a category. Like, there's done some work with Roblox and so Visa and gaming around Roblox. So I think it's not just sort of how-tos and tutorials, some sort of more engaging ways of putting finance products in
Yeah. It is that kind of beautiful constraint gigabits, isn't it? So I can't say the same for healthcare, that a lot of regulation around that sector, but actually the kind of things you can do with patients talking about their experiences or healthcare professionals can be really powerful. We do some work with V for part of my GSK focusing on HIV prevention, the cure, and that's the kind of end of work that you really want to be doing, I think. And yeah, great.
Well, it's deeply personal. I think both of those examples are like, it can't get more deeply personal than that. Like your health, your financial stability, the way you operate in the world every day, right? It's like, that's, again, I think why I believe creator content works is that it is inherently human and personal, and like we connect over those shared experiences. So if you can bring that to the table in ways that are real and true and fun and different, like unexpected, I think there's real power to that. And it's real creative.
The Middle East stat, I'm sure it's relatively similar elsewhere, that auto is the fastest growing category on TikTok. And absolutely, then I think some of our auto clients, we do bits, but there's definitely one of those categories where I think we could do more. And I think it's one of those categories that hasn't quite made the switch and sort of maximize, as you say, what's happening on platforms. We do campaign, but I don't think we do enough of the always on.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of interesting data and acceleration around electric vehicles and these like Polestar and the likes, which is interesting, obviously just a subset. But I agree. That is one that surprises me that there's not more going on, because it's such a passion category. Like you could tap into existing fandoms in ways that could be immediately powerful.
But the measurement for that piece is tricky because it's such a long purchase cycle that to get to improve it, if you're a client, you're kind of investing for a long period of time without potentially seeing a payback.
That's true.
What you say to also clients, again, is especially on YouTube, the long tail of a piece of influencer content is just massive. So if you do a piece, how often the car models change, like 5 to 7 years, 10 years, if you've done a really good job at the beginning of getting all the big auto influencers to review it on YouTube, those assets can pay back for years.
Yeah.
And so they'll keep paying back.
I think obviously we've all been following what's happening in the US as a global group with global clients. I'm really curious to hear, what is the global perspective on channels today? We can start with TikTok, but more broadly, what channels are your clients really interested in investing in? What has kind of bubbled up recently in terms of areas of interest? Where are you kind of exploring?
Well, I think I'd say the kind of classics are Instagram and TikTok. Like that tends to occupy the majority of like where clients are spending. But then we're also seeing like interesting experiments, or like obviously on Snap, on like Reddit, on Pinterest, on like a kind of range of tends to be smaller investments and a bit more experimental. But I think those are platforms that you can do really interesting things on. And I think it's almost better not to be restrictive on them. Like there are examples of campaigns where you see like, here's the content that's produced specifically for one platform, but the different kind of ways that you can create content around a brand, around a point of view for other platforms. And yeah, if you think people aren't spending their lives on like sticking rigidly to one social platform, so it's better to be across many,
all everywhere. What were the conversations around the potential ban in the US for TikTok? How did you ride that wave? I can speak for us because it was a wave. So we're still riding, but also kind of a wave of nothing, right? It was like possibly big news, no news, possibly big news, no news. So it's like hurry up and wait.
So TikTok's already banned in India. So we get a little brief in India as a market, and they were bats and eyelid, but you just do it on Instagram, basically. You know, it's kind of generally it's the switch. So I think people are to some extent still used to that. Most the global platforms have a very strong global footprint. So obviously anomaly markets like China, people just brief slightly differently. But to be honest, we're always adapting everything locally, like no matter how good the global guidelines. You know, the power comes from really good kind of culturally nuanced activation. And so I think that the channel, yes, I think it would be a massive shame to talk about the places, but I think in terms of users and how engaged they are on that platform, it's sort of blend of community and entertainment is really unique. It's still got, so much value to give. But I think the switch just happens really easily. It's easy for brand people, actually. I don't think they miss it. They just say, okay, but they're all the way here. It's just, pragmatic shit.
And zooming out, like creators aren't going to stop creating. They're going to switch to other platforms or build up their audiences on other platforms. Just because it's a case of being a bit nimble and agile and seeing how things go.
And I also do think often we rely too much on Instagram and TikTok as a default. I think we always used to say probably not anymore. We always used to say Twitter, sort of underrepresented, but I don't necessarily say now. Snap, arguably for some categories we don't use enough of. YouTube, I think we massively underuse it now.
Yep.
And I do think it's sort of got a bit too much default to, we just get a brief saying these are the platform versus a really asked to look at the platforms and look at users and look what's going on. And some marketers are better than others, but some the default is it has to be on these channels. So I do, forcing a break from sort of the status quo, I don't think it's ever a bad thing.
Yeah, and we're seeing that too, like the data in our platform, if you look at kind of campaign coverage across the different channels, Instagram is still the dominant, for sure. It's like included in 98+% of campaigns. TikTok and YouTube, specifically YouTube Shorts, have been accelerating, right? Year on year. Snap is similarly like accelerating contender. So I think it's really interesting, especially around video content. Some of these new platforms are really starting to like take share with these formats that are really working for people. But I agree, it's like for years, it's been like the stalwarts. We talked a little bit, I think it's hard to have a conversation around social media without looking at kind of both sides of it, right? Like the good and the bad. How do you think creators really combat and add to like the positivity, optimism, like the good side of social media? I'd love to hear, again, your perspective from working across so many channels, so many markets, so many brands, so many creators. What are the bright spots?
So, and again, I'm stealing with pride here or sharing actually one of our very close strategy colleagues on our strategy team, Publicis. She's working on an initiative at the moment called Developing Mindful Media Plans with exactly that. So how do we combat some of the doom scrolling where a lot of our paid social ends up perhaps in those environments which sort of suck you in and you don't have a very healthy half an hour, refocusing for the right brief and client and audience on sort of more mindful channels. And this relates to creators as well. So thinking about things like Spotify, and there's lots of data. When you're on that platform, you're then generally there sort of more in a healthier mindset. You might be soothing yourself, entertaining yourself, enjoying yourself, but you're probably not doom scrolling in the same way. Same with Twitch. Again, it loads of data from that platform and how positive it is as a channel, and very positive communities. Again, very rich creative platform. And just podcasts in general. We think audio influencers, again, because it's a slightly different metric and user experience, it doesn't tend to show up on platforms like yours, but audio influencers are huge. So podcasters are huge. And again, people tend to, there's lots of data around. You listen to podcasts to learn, increase your knowledge, or, enjoy your passions, or interests. So again, you're in a slightly different space and more, a passive listening, probably mindful space that you might be when you're looking through TikTok and you just keep getting served videos and you can't quite stop, although you need to go unload the dishwasher or something. So I think it's a really nice build, more mindful creators, and I think audio, gaming sort of play into that spot.
I love that. Like the spaces you go to learn, to restore. It's like, again, thinking about, to relax. It's the why.
If you're a brand, that's like ideally what you want to be putting out on any social channel is things that are going to help, like, people have fun, relax. You want to be putting something positive out, and that's going to help your content stand out more. So I think it should pay back. You take that on a positive approach.
Love that. Okay, speaking of positive, this is going to be a little bit of a left turn, right turn set egg. I want to talk about you and the positivity you bring to your group, to your team, to the company at large. Seeing two women in leadership, a group as historied as Publicis is really great to see. So I want to talk a little bit about your role as a leader. Like, what responsibility do you take in that, and how do you try to build a productive, inclusive environment for your teams to come up and to be that next generation of leadership?
I'd say actually within the group is, like, obviously these kind of things are never like super easy, but I think it's well set up for like that kind of positive experience. So one thing that we've done is launch an influencer community. So that's a call that we lead, but anyone that works in influencer from across the group can join it. And we tend to invite people to share their case studies, share their challenges. And it's a kind of open forum where people can talk, learn from each other. And it's great in a way of kind of like setting standards of what like you can see a market achieve that, is maybe with a particular client that you might also be working on or things like that. So I think there's a good kind of sharing, open community that we're trying to develop more and more?
I think the group has other initiatives around female empowerment and host virtual seminars and things like that. So I think I've been there a long time, and I think as a female leader, actually just doesn't feel like anything special than he. Ever since I was there, actually, which is 20 years this year.
Wow. Happy anniversary. 20 years is like longer than any relationship I've ever been in.
It's quite good. But I think ever since I started, there'd always be female leaders, especially I was worked with global teams. There's always been, pretty strong female leadership throughout my career. I think you see it, continuing. I think our teams, I think it is a largely female dominated industry. I mean, I'm not sure what the stats are, but definitely I think our teams, majority female, broad teams, majority female. And I think the part of the business we work in as well, which is sort of the creative part of the media side I get, and our influencer teams are very female dominated. I think it's kind of a,
But there are some nice things we've been doing recently, like really trying to celebrate wins, which isn't like always something that happens, but is like, that's a really positive pushback. And
that's so positive. I agree. We've been talking a lot about that internally as well within the marketing teams, but at the company in general is like, we're all moving so fast and it's like always on to the next, that stopping and really like sitting in a victory for a minute is like big. And that can be a personal victory, a team victory, an accomplishment, like some sort of shared milestone. Because again, like, especially with B2B SaaS, like our work is very cyclical. Yeah. It's not like start, stop, ship. So I think that's really important. It's like the little things that we forget to do at like the normal pace of things. Did you say your board is majority female?
No, our workforce.
Oh, your workforce. Okay. I was like, that really surprised me, just because I know in general, not within a group or company specifically, of e.l.f. Cosmetics just did this amazing campaign in the US. They did a big research study that found that of all of the companies traded on NASDAQ, which is what they are a part of, there are more white men on boards of directors named Richard than any women or women of color. And so they ran a campaign called So Many Dicks and like bought massive like installations, like tons of stuff like in subway stations in New York, like big, huge, like just trying to drive awareness of like, this is actually how big like Gap is. It's brilliant. And are like standing behind it. But like, what an insight. Like,
but it's a kind of privileged position when you feel like you're like actually as relatively,
I find that sad, because actually on the news this morning, the Goldman Sachs CEO was on talking about how they've dropped their policy to not work with companies that have at least one female or one black board member, because it was no longer necessary, because like D&I was done. So it's a real shame.
We're seeing those stories like, more and more every day. And I agree. I think it's a real opportunity for companies to lean into the value of the power of diverse and inclusive workforces. If our workforces represent the people that we work for, I feel like it has to be a good
point. As like it's not even a question, it's like a business benefit.
Yeah, and it's great to see that you guys have felt that kind of from day one. Again, that's always one of my like loading questions to other women in leadership is like, have you recognized that you are a woman in leadership? Has been a part of your journey? And it's different for everybody. Everybody has different experiences.
I think Publicis, generally their flexible work, they sort of committed to the 3 days a week. And I actually think, the parents on both sides of the house, men and women, I think actually it really helps people manage and balance both. So I think they do. Yeah, I generally think most people on that aspect will probably feel pretty supported. I mean, you see so much data we don't see. Well, you have access to sort of an aggregate of data we don't see across brands. I guess for you, what are the sort of the trends you're seeing beyond, you've talked about some creative communities, is there any actual sort of, I don't know, other categories or categories of business or content or interest or just anything else that you think, oh, that's super interesting that we're seeing popping up?
When you look at the retention leader org, dominated by sports brands. And like that makes sense, right? Because it's like fandom, right? People are so loyal to their fans. But we're seeing sports in general come up in a way in terms, like if you look at cross-sector, cross-vertical leaderboards, the way they are mobilizing and amplifying the voices of their fans is really impressive. And then there's so many good, like kind of celebrity athlete examples of like moving from being just a traditional spokesperson into being like, you're starting your own brand, your own company, you're going diversifying yourself as like a brand and a business owner. And I think that has actually really helped to fuel the kind of cup that we've seen in sports. But yeah, sports is a really good example of something that's really coming up in our data. I think the other thing that's really interesting is the kind of a delve on the like creator-led, creator-founded brands. We're seeing a lot more of those come up, but also hit scale pretty quickly. And it's sustainable way, right? So this isn't just like kind of like launch hot and like taper off, but really have staying power and really starting to take kind of share of voice, share of influence from some pretty established brands and some pretty established sectors. So I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch, especially as there are more creators that kind of achieve that level of kind of community and connection where like their community wants to see them succeed. And so when they put products out, they're generally really accepted. So I think we'll see more and more of that. We're seeing it across categories. I think, beverage and CPG is a really interesting category for that. Beauty, they've been doing that for, a while now. But just really quickly to wrap us up, thank you both so much for being here. I feel like we could keep talking for another hour, but we'll just have to save it for another episode. And really appreciate your time and thoughts as always.
Be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Earned by CreatorIQ. CreatorIQ is your all-in-one solution to grow, manage, scale, and measure your influencer marketing program. Ready to unlock the power of the creator economy? Get started with a demo today at CreatorIQ.com.